Hi, and welcome back to Abigail's Bookshelf. Today, we are going to review all of the books that I read in the month of June. So let's get into it. The first book I finished in the month of June is a collection of essays written by queer people about horror movies called It Came from the Closet, edited by Joel Valise. This was a pick from my nonfiction challenge, which I am now officially halfway through. I really enjoyed it. I am actually not much of a horror movie fan. In fact, I wouldn't even call myself really a movie fan. I have like 4 movies that I'll watch and that's kind of it. I just like would rather be reading a book or writing a book or playing a video game. I don't even really watch TV that often. I watch it occasionally. I like to watch YouTube videos. This is all beside the point. The point is I don't really watch movies that much, and I certainly don't really watch horror movies that much. So despite the fact that I'm not really a big horror connoisseur, I am a big queer person connoisseur. So I actually really deeply enjoyed this collection of essays. There were really none that were misses. They were all really good. There were a couple that really stood out to me, and when I googled the authors to see if they had novels or other books, of course, like they didn't, which pissed me off. But hey, now I've got someone to follow and look out for essays in the future. But there were a lot of like kind of memoir-esque sort of essays where the authors were talking about their experiences as a queer person growing up and seeing these movies, which was really great. I'm not usually a big memoir person, but I like personal essays that are about like a very specific thing. I'm not really interested in reading a memoir about your whole life, no offense. It was really great. This is a really roundabout way to say it was really great and I really enjoyed it. Can you tell I'm really rusty and haven't done a video in a while? It was wonderful. 10 out of 10. If you like horror movies, I highly recommend. If you're a queer person, I highly recommend. If you are a queer person who likes horror movies, this is made for you. So check this out. Wonderful. It Came from the Closet. Also, great name. Great title. Next up, I fear I read an all-time favorite. I read The Curse of Callion, Lois McMaster Bujold. I fear it's a favorite. I fear it's a favorite. I was really on a kick, I still am kind of reading some more what I would call classic fantasy. So stuff mostly from like the 90s and the 2000s because I read, as you guys know, I'm a huge Assassin's Apprentice fan. All of the Farseer books are my faves. So I wanted to kind of read more of that style. I also really love Anne McCaffrey's Dragon Riders of Pern series. I love Mercedes Lackey's Harold Mage's series, the gay ones. I know there's a lot of them. So that's all to say that I really just really love that particular era of fantasy and particularly what women were writing in fantasy. I can't speak for men, I don't read about them. But it was just so good. Curse of Callion, I think it's pronounced Callion, I don't know. It was so good. It was so good. I think probably the women of this golden age of fantasy could single-handedly make me think it's okay for men to be in books because they write men so well, you know? And maybe that's something we can plunge into later, but I really enjoyed the character of Kazaril. Amazing name also before there were a bunch of Kazes. And this is a fantasy book about a young man named Kazaril who is a former noble who has been a captive on a slave ship for the past, I think he's on there for about a year. And so the book opens with him walking home after his ship was liberated. And he accidentally finds himself as the tutor to a princess of this nation and is by all intents and purposes, easy for you to say, going to become queen one day. And so she gets invited to court, and Kazarol reluctantly tags along. He finds his old enemy there, the one who's responsible for him being on the slave ship to begin with. And he also discovers that there is a really heinous curse set on this royal family, and it's just like it was so good. It was just classic, like, sorcery, swords. The women in the book were excellent. The second book in the series is actually about the princess's mother, and she's older. I'm not sure exactly how old she is. I wanna say she's, like, early 40s maybe, and so I'm gonna start that one next. I'm really excited about reading that one because how many times do you read about, like, an older woman in fantasy being the hero of fantasy? You don't. So I'm really excited about that. This book was excellent, really classic fantasy, really great prose, and I also think that I don't wanna, like, go fully into it because it will spoil part of the book, but I find it really interesting, and I probably will, like, make a whole video about this once I have coherent thoughts, but I find it really interesting that in this era of fantasy, particularly female writers, are doing really interesting stuff with gender and sexuality that I did not expect to be going on. Not necessarily because for any particular reason other than the fact of, that just, like, queerness and controversial ideas about gender were not particularly mainstream when these women were writing. And it is fantasy, right? And I always expect fantasy to try to do a little bit more with kind of being on the cutting edge of something. It doesn't have to always be gender and sexuality, but that's my particular area of interest. And so I think fantasy is a really great place to explore that and to get into it and to figure out why we have the certain beliefs about gender and sexuality that we do, and what would it be like if we didn't. And so this book does something really, really interesting. If you've read it, you know what I'm talking about. If you haven't read it, highly recommend you read it to find out what I'm talking about. And like I said, I probably will do like a full video because I have thoughts about gender and sexuality from a bunch of different fantasy books of this era that I've read. But all of that to say, really great book. It's really stuck with me. I've been thinking about it for weeks. And it's excellent. It's excellent. I highly recommend. Really good classic fantasy, really great female characters. There's a little bit of romance. I personally don't feel that the characters had that much chemistry, but that's just me. And that's always gonna be an uphill battle when they're straight to me. So do with that what you will. But Kazarol was really wonderful character. He was very interesting. I think another thing that female writers like to do in their fantasy from this time period is to make their men really sad and pathetic. And I love that. I love that. If I'm going to read about a man, I want him to be sad and pathetic. I'm not here for macho. I'm not here for the biggest, baddest sword in the fight yard. I am here for this man is so depressed he can barely function and he will cry if you look at him the wrong way. You know? I just feel like that's men's natural state. So anyway, that was A Curse of Callian. Highly recommend. If you've never read Bujal, get into it. Next book. This one, it I wanted it to be great. It's like that, that Abby Lee Miller quote, "You were good and wanted you to be great." That's how I felt about this book. Next up is Year of the Return by, I'm gonna read this because I will butcher it, Ivana Akotawa Ofori. Sorry if I pronounced that wrong. If I find a clip of her actually saying her name, I will put that here so that you can hear how her name is actually supposed to be pronounced.
Ivana Akotawa Ofori.
Ivana Akotawa Ofori. Okay, so I was just putting the emphasis on the wrong place because I speak English and none of her emphasis makes sense. This book had a really, really interesting premise. And the premise is that this young woman and her friends go to, I'm gonna look so fucking ignorant talking about this book because I forget details that are important. And it's gonna look like I'm just conglomerating all African nations into one, but really I genuinely can't remember names of anything, even when it's real places. I want to say it was in Nigeria. Hold. I'm gonna look this up. Let me not be ignorant. Let me fucking look it up. I have the whole world right here in my hands. Let me find out. Oh, I would have looked stupid because it was Ghana. Okay, idiot. Okay, I'm actually learning. I'm actually learning a lot. I should Google things more. I just read so much fantasy that I assume everything I'm reading is not real, and that's just literally not true. Okay, hang on. Premise of this book. Sorry for the intermission. Premise of this book is a young woman and her friends go to Ghana for what I've just learned it was a real event called the Year of the Return, which happened in 2019. It was a real initiative put on by Ghana to invite the descendants of enslaved people who were taken from Ghana back to Ghana to like reconnect with their heritage. That apparently was a real thing that happened. The book is about a not real thing that happened during the Year of the Return, which is as this group of friends, there is the main character whose name I cannot remember. Please, it was in first person. She never says her name. The main character and her friend, who I believe was ancestrally Jamaican. And then she has another friend who is just entirely Black American. And then, and by entirely, I mean no immigrant, no direct immigrant connections. And then the Black American's boyfriend, who I assume was white, I don't know. The way he acted was sometimes kind of white, but she never actually says, so I don't know. They go to Ghana for the year of the return. And while they are there touring one of the forts that was used to hold colonial armies and enslaved people, they see a ghost of an enslaved person like walking across the water towards them. They all get understandably freaked out. They move along in their vacation thing. They all just had a shared hallucination, and come to find out this is happening all over the coast of Ghana, where people are seeing the ghosts of enslaved people walking towards the shore. Eventually this expands out to happening all across the Atlantic and becomes like this global kind of pandemic. The book was written after COVID had happened, but not in the timeline of the book. COVID had not happened. And so I could tell that she was using like a lot of what happened during COVID, but in this like supernatural event, this global supernatural event. Eventually, the enslaved people make it to shore and they start to possess the bodies of their descendants. Some of them tell their stories, some of them just like try to live, and like there's like the end is was one of the things that kind of disappointed me because it was not made super clear like why that was happening or what the ghosts wanted, or like it was just, or like what do we do now. Like the book ended really abruptly. My complaint, I think, is that it was just like really messily laid out, and I think that reduced the impact of the wonderful idea of this book and the wonderful premise. When she was actually talking about the ghost, it was excellent. It was really intriguing. I really loved the supernatural element, but also the historical elements that she included. But I just didn't really understand what was going on. And some of the dialogue between the characters felt extremely didactic in the way of like, yeah, I'm not stupid. I mean, some people are stupid. Some people do need to be told slavery was bad. And what happened to enslaved people was really horrid, really horrendous and horrible. But as someone educated, it felt a little bit didactic sometimes. I think a lot of the time when she would kind of go into the sort of social fallout, again, it would get a little bit didactic and a little bit like a social justice warrior speak. And so I don't feel like it was quite reaching the levels of depth that it could reach about the topic because it was too concerned with like reminding us that slavery was bad and that the way Black people are treated is bad. And again, there are fucking morons out there who don't understand that, but they are also not going to be the people who pick up this book. So I was confused about who the audience of the book was supposed to be. Because of that, I feel like what was a really wonderful idea just really didn't work. And also it was a novella, and so I feel like it could have been a whole novel. I was far more interested in the story of of the main character's enslaved ancestor than I was about the white boyfriend. So I just felt like there was a lot of the book was like getting in a car and going someplace else, and I'm like, this is a novella, Diva. Like, we're running out of time. You don't have space to be telling us how cars work. Like, we don't need to be getting in cars all the time. So I just felt like it was a really big idea and a really good idea, and it just like was trying to be written on the head of a nail, and it didn't work, which is really disappointing because, like I said, really cool idea. The moments that she could execute it, it was executed really well, but overall it was just ineffective as a novella to me. And you guys know I'm snobs about novellas. That's how I feel, unfortunately. I think if you're at all interested by the premise, you should check it out anyway, because we should definitely be reading more, not only by Black authors, especially speculative fiction, but immigrant Black authors and authors writing in the diaspora and, you know, from Africa in particular. So check it out if you're interested. It was not bad. I think it just could have been better, and that feels worse than it just being bad. So There you go. Year of the Return. And the final book that I read in June. Final book I read in June. Listen, I was thinking about nuns a lot, which is kind of been like my resting state recently. But I was thinking about nuns, and so I finally picked up The Unworthy, which I have heard a lot about. The Unworthy by Augustina Bazterrica. I'm an equal opportunity name butcher. Don't you even worry about it. I don't think it's quite a novella. I think it's just a short novel. But what a ride. I recommend reading this one in one sitting, which is not an impossible ask. It's pretty, like I said, it's a short novel. It's about a convent cult place in post climate disaster and or post nuclear war future. It is a fucking weird book. It is a horror book. Full disclaimer, it is definitely a horror book. There is a lot of mentions of sexual assault in there, so be forewarned. It is a weird fucking book. And yet, I found myself completely enraptured from beginning to end because the main character is such a freak. And I say that with love. If you're gonna read about nuns, let them be freaks. It was just, I can't even like fully put words to the experience of it. It was horrific. It was delightful. So, um, and I think to kind of, not to kind of beat a dead horse here, but so this book was also very short, but I think it was very close in on the scale of what it was doing. The scope was very, very narrowly defined. It's about this one particular nun over the course of, I want to say, like a week. The world is very insular, the world is very small, and so you do eventually get flashbacks of her life before she came to the convent, which is how you find out that this is post-nuclear disaster, climate disaster, in the future. And it takes something and makes it extremely small and focuses on a slice of the life. We're not getting the whole picture. And I think that this book also left me with a lot of questions at the end, but they were the questions that I was intended to be left with. It wasn't, I'm confused, did I miss something? It was, hey, I have questions, don't answer them. I actually would rather not know. So that's kind of, I think, the difference between this one and The Year of the Return. I think this one was a little bit more effective in its scope. It knew exactly what it was trying to accomplish, and it did that. And I think Year of the Return was just too ambitious, and there were moments where she just zoomed out too much, and I think lost the the human aspect of the story. And that said, really fucking weird book. You have to have a strong stomach. Like, I'm talking iron stomach for this one. I knew it was a horror, but I was expecting it to be more gothic horror than like gore horror. So just kind of keep that in mind. It's a deeply unsettling book. Made me feel really fucking weird the whole time I was reading it. Read it during the day in a well-lit area around people you trust. It just was there's not really like a moment of like pure horror, right? Like it's not like a slasher film. It's not like a Saw like it's just like this dread that like pervades the whole novel and was just really freaky and weird. And yeah, it was awesome. Highly recommend if you are interested in horror and you love nuns like I do, get into it. And I've got other nuns on my list, so stay tuned for more nun books. I've said enough. Some would say I've said too much. So I'm gonna leave this here. I'll see you in July if I don't see you sooner. I'm just busy, you know? So forgive me for the infrequent uploads. I will try to amend my fallen ways. Also, not to point fingers, but someone who edits the videos has gone out of town for the whole summer and is having fun instead of editing my stupid little videos. So I edited a couple by myself and I was like, this is too much work, I'm bored. So that's on me. That's on me. We love and miss editor Amy and hope she comes back soon because otherwise it's just gonna be monthly uploads. How do people do this? You know? That's what I always think. Like, you do this whole thing by yourself? You don't have Amy doing editing them for you? That's crazy. You do all of it by your do you have a job? Like another job? I have a job. Ugh. Anyway, that's all. I'm done whining. I hope you have a wonderful continuation of your it's actually like officially summer now, but I hope you have a wonderful continuation of your summer. Um, and I'll see you at the end of July. If not sooner, fingers crossed for sooner. Bye. Cat hair in my mouth. That's gross. But I picked this for my nonfiction pick. There's a cat in the litter box, and I know for a fact that you can hear them digging in the litter box. Just gotta wait for them to be done. And we're digging, but they are both in the bathroom at the same time while I'm filming, which is just incredibly rude. It's really beyond the pale. Okay, there's one out. Maybe it was just Hal. Okay, back to what I was saying. By Lois. So the cats don't get along yet, in case you can't tell. And they like to hiss at each other, and Ozzy, my brother's cat, likes to just scream like a witch. So that's fun at midnight. Anyway, this is not a cat video.